lot of people who are hearing God's call to improve the world get distracted by making big changes and solving big problems. They get distracted by the bigness of it because it seems logical, right? It seems logical that if you want to address a big problem, you need an equally big solution. That's just not the case. In his book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell talks about something fascinating that happened in New York. There was a huge crime surge that had been going on. Crime had been increasing for forever, and they tried everything that they thought they could. And then the mayor of New York hired a new law enforcement officer who had really strange ideas. He had this idea that this huge problem of crime could be solved with small things, that the answer to this big problem was a small solution. They called it broken windows policing. And the idea is that when a criminal is looking to set up shop somewhere, they are going to be looking for a place that seems like people don't care about it. So they'll go past street after street after street, theoretically, in this metaphor, and then they'll get to a street where there's broken windows, there's graffiti that's not been cleaned up, and they'll say, oh, people don't care about this street. Nobody's paying attention here. This is where I'm going to set up shop. And the theory goes, if you just fix the broken windows and you fix the graffiti on the walls, you'll see a decrease in crime. So they were going to put the theory to the test. They decided that they were going to clean the subways of all of the graffiti and stop people they were going to really enforce subway tolls. People would kind of hop over the toll booth instead of paying for it and run onto the subways. People ridiculed them, said this was a ridiculous idea. They tried it, and it turns out it worked. Focusing on all of these other things ended up decreasing crime dramatically over the course of a couple of decades. It reversed a sort of long trend line. And that's because one of the most mysterious things is that oftentimes big problems have small solutions. And so if you want to start something big and good, or if you want to stop something big and bad, you have to think small. There's another example of it, sort of the converse, starting something big and good in the book of Acts in the Christian New Testament. At this point, Jesus has left the picture, right? Has left the movement in the hands of the disciples, and there's not a lot of them. Maybe 50, probably less. They're all gathered. They have a huge spiritual moment. People start ridiculing them, and then Peter, one of their leaders, stands up in Acts chapter 2 and gives a sermon. But it's not like 15 minutes long, or 20 or 30 minutes long, an hour long, like a lot of modern day preachers. It's a couple of minutes long. Short sermon. It says what needs to be said. And then it says that 3,000 people signed on to this cause that day. And it kept going from there. Right? Those people went back to their places, and thousands more came, and thousands more came, until you have one of the world's major world religions. If you want to start something big and good, or stop something big and bad, oftentimes the solution is small. clean up graffiti, crime rates go down. Talk out loud for a couple of minutes in a crowd, 3,000 people join your cause. So when you look at a problem, I don't want you to ask, how do I stop the big problem? Because the big problem is probably so big that it feels like an impossibility, right? World hunger, or racial inequality, or you just name any of them. You think of this big problem and you will get overwhelmed into inaction. Now the key is thinking small. The question you need to ask yourself is not, what is the big solution to this big problem? It's this: what can 2 or 3 people in my city do to impact this problem? That's it. The key is small. What can 2 or 3 people in my city do to impact this problem? You start small. The benefit of this is that it's easy to get into action, to get into a pattern of action, and it's low risk. You're not trying to gather investors for millions of dollars. You're just doing something about the problem. But what happens when you find the right small solution is those 2 or 3 people turn into 4 or 5, turn into 10, and then they contact their friend in the next city over who brings 2 or 3 people there, and you've got a movement on your hands. The key to big problems is small solutions. And so today, the spiritual call is to think small.